Okay, let's unpack this. You know that feeling, right? When you're totally in the zone, deep in a flow state, and you blink, and suddenly 2 hours have just vanished.
Hmm.
Or the flip side, you're stuck in some boring meeting, and 5 minutes feels like an entire geological epoch has passed you by.
Oh, absolutely. That elastic experience of time.
Exactly. And that gets right to the heart of the mystery we're tackling today. Is life a continuous, unbroken river, what people like William James called the stream of consciousness?
Right.
Or is it something else? Is it a massive chain of individual snapshots that our brain is just frantically stitching together to make a coherent movie?
It's a debate that's been going for centuries, really, from philosophers to now neuroscientists with their brain scanners.
So our mission in this deep dive is pretty simple. We're going into the source material to figure out if the brain is truly recording life like a documentary,
Huh.
or if it's deceiving us with a beautifully constructed film.
And if it is a film, the big question is, who's the director and who's the audience?
It's a huge question.
It is. And what's so fascinating is that this sophisticated machinery of perception, it often reveals itself through really simple, everyday things.
Like optical illusion.
Exactly. Before we dive into the neural networks, we can start with something everyone has seen that kind of exposes that mismatch between the real world and what we experience.
Right. The source material kicks off with those illusions where the brain's editing room, it clearly misses a beat.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most famous one has to be the wagon wheel effect.
Yes.
You've seen this, right? A ceiling fan or maybe a wheel in an old movie spinning forward really fast. But on screen, it looks like it's slowing down, stopping, or even
Turning backward.
turning backward, even though you absolutely know it's moving forward.
And that feeling, that conflict between what you know and what you see, that's the key. The physical fan isn't changing direction. It's moving smoothly.
So what does that illusion tell us about how the brain is actually processing time and motion?
It proves our perception is not a raw feed. It just can't be. Something is out of sync between the world and what your brain is processing. We're not watching a live stream.
Where's a series of pictures?
A series of pictures. And if the speed of the wheel happens to line up just right or just wrong with the rate your brain is sampling, you get that weird backward motion. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
If the wagon wheel is a gentle hint, then rare neurological cases are like a loud alarm bell. These are the cracks through which we can actually see the machinery working underneath.
Let's get into those cases.
Yeah.
They sound like something out of science fiction.
They're heartbreaking, but so informative. The sources describe patients with severe amnesia, and they're trapped in this ultra-short present moment,
How short?
just a few seconds of awareness. The sources compare them to a flickering firefly. They blink on, then off, then on again. There's no thread connecting the moments.
So they can see what's happening in the moment, but that moment has no connection to what came before or what comes next. They're living in totally disjointed frames.
Precisely. They're missing that temporal glue. But maybe even more shocking is a condition called motion blindness.
Motion blindness.
Yes. The sources tell this story of a patient who had a stroke. Her ability to see color and shape was completely normal, but she lost the ability to see movement.
Wait, I don't get that. If she could see but couldn't see motion, what did the world even look like?
A stuttering stop-motion animation. So imagine a car driving down the street. It would look stationary until suddenly it was dangerously close. It just jumped locations.
Wow.
Or get this, when she poured water from a teapot, she didn't see a smooth stream. She saw a frozen block of ice just hanging in the air
Until
the water had already flooded the table.
That's terrifying. It makes it sound like movement is something the brain adds to the picture, not something it just passively receives.
Exactly. Her world was on permanent pause. And it confirms that movement is an interpolation. We even see a milder version of this when the system is under stress. Some migraine sufferers, for instance, report seeing the world not as smooth motion, but as flashing still images.
Like a strobe light.
Yes, sometimes as slow as 6 to 12 frames per second.
Okay, so if these glitches prove that smoothness is a construction, not a raw feed, what did the sources say is the actual rate? How often is the brain grabbing information?
Well, that takes us right into part 2, the brain's editing room. And the key finding, the thing that really shifts the whole perspective, is that the brain does not film reality continuously.
There's not a video camera.
Not at all. It samples the world in these discrete bursts.
How often is it sampling?
The visual system grabs these information packets roughly 3 to 20 times per second.
And if you're at that lower end,
Mm.
like the 6 to 12 frames the migraine patients see,
It feels jerky, it feels fragmented, but once you hit 20 frames per second or higher, the brain can successfully stitch it all into what feels like smooth motion.
so the continuous flow we all feel is just. It's heavy post-production work by our brains to smooth out the raw data.
That is the core idea. And this leads to these models trying to explain how the discrete snapshots become a subjective flow. Scientists like Crick and Koch, they suggested consciousness is just a series of snapshots, and the feeling of smooth movement is painted onto them after the fact.
But if it's a series of pictures, why don't we see the gaps? The black space between the frames.
Oh, that's where a mechanism called temporal lag comes in. The illusion of flow is created because each moment of consciousness, each snapshot lasts about 100 milliseconds, and this is the crucial part, it overlaps with the next moment.
Okay, so it's deliberate. Why is that overlap so important?
Think of it like a camera shutter that stays open just long enough for the next shutter to start opening before the first one fully closes.
So there's never any black space.
Never any black space. It prevents that fragmentation and gives us that feeling of an uninterrupted self. If that overlap gets disrupted, if it's too short or too long, that's when the world becomes jerky, or in the case of motion blindness, freezes completely.
So the continuous self that I feel I am is basically a trick of perfect momentary temporal overlap.
Precisely. And now we have to zoom in one level deeper. What actually is a single conscious snapshot? It's not just one neuron firing.
Right.
It's thousands, maybe millions of neurons all forming a temporary synchronized coalition.
A coalition. You mean like a flash mob in the brain?
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. A flash mob of neural activity. This coalition activates together for a brief moment, that's the snapshot, and then it dissolves immediately.
And a new one forms for the next moment.
A new one forms representing the next piece of awareness. They're these temporary self-organizing teams.
Okay, but then how do we maintain a consistent personality? A core self? If we're just a series of constantly dissolving and reforming coalitions, wouldn't we just be, chaotic?
No. That's the critical question. And the answer is that while the snapshots are the mechanism, the stream is the story they build over time. A scientist named Edelman called this process neural selection.
Like neural Darwinism.
Basically, yes. The coalitions that are relevant in any given moment, the ones that help you focus on a threat or enjoy a piece of music, those connections are strengthened and they survive momentarily. The irrelevant ones get pruned away.
So the individual coalitions are temporary.
Right.
But the pathways they use are getting reinforced every single time they fire.
Exactly. And that is how the stream gains its consistent shape over a lifetime.
Which leads directly to learning and habits, doesn't it? If the brain is constantly doing this, then every single experience has to be changing the next frame of the film.
That is the profound implication. It all ties back to a foundational idea in neuroscience, Hebb's principle from 1949. The famous line is, neurons that fire together wire together.
Or connect more strongly.
Connect more strongly, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the scale of this process is it's staggering. The brain has hundreds of trillions of these connections.
So every single thought, every feeling, every action is actively editing the film of our consciousness.
It is. The brain isn't just passively reflecting your experience. It's reorganizing itself based on that experience, constantly strengthening the networks you use most, your habits, your reactions, and pruning the ones you don't.
So the synthesis here seems pretty clear then. Is consciousness a flow or is it fragmented? The answer is, it's both.
It's both, just at different levels of reality.
At the micro level, the neural level, with the electrical pulses and the coalitions, it's pure snapshots.
Yeah.
Discrete packets of information.
Right.
But at the macro level, our subjective experience, thanks to that temporal lag and all the brain's post-production,
Sure.
we get a continuous self. We get the flow.
The film analogy is perfect. A movie is just 24 still frames per second, but we experience a living story. The brain edits the film, the mind watches the film, and understanding that it's a construction that gives us incredible power, because if it's constructed,
It can be reconstructed.
it can be reconstructed.
And this is where the science goes from just being fascinating to
Yeah.
being genuinely practical wisdom. I mean, understanding this mechanism changes how you see yourself, your struggles, everything.
It really does. Consider this first insight. You are not a broken frame. So many of us, we let a single bad experience, a mistake at work, a breakup, a trauma, we let it define our whole life story.
We freeze on that one frame.
We freeze on that one frame and label ourselves with it. I am a failure. I am unlovable.
And because that memory has such a high emotional charge, the brain just keeps refiring that same coalition.
Of course, the brain is geared for survival, so it clings to the bad frame as a warning. But if consciousness is a film woven from countless moments, then no single moment deserves a life sentence for the whole story.
So you have the power to re-edit.
You have the power to re-edit the film by adding new frames, by connecting them into a different story. You can't erase the bad frame, but you can choose what comes next.
And that leads right into the second insight about our emotions. If everything is just a snapshot, then even the most overwhelming feelings have to be temporary.
That is the liberating part. Emotions are just temporary frames. When you're in the grip of intense anger or fear, it feels eternal. It feels like it's all you are. But fundamentally, it's just a temporary neural activation, a coalition that will eventually dissolve. It has to.
That perspective is really the core of what people call presence, isn't it? It's about moving away from that identification with the emotion.
Yes. The crucial shift is from thinking, I am angry, to recognizing, in this film of my consciousness, there is currently a scene of anger. It's not the whole story.
You become the audience member in the theater watching the movie, not just the actor lost in the scene.
Exactly. The actor is stuck with the script. The audience can see that the scene will end.
And realizing that gives us the power to actually rewire the director of the film, our habits, our reactions.
Absolutely. Remember Hebb's principle. Neurons that fire together wire together. So if every time you face stress, your go-to reaction is to lose your temper, you are strengthening that destructive circuit. You're making that scene more likely to show up again.
So how do you change it?
The path to change starts with small acts. The sources say it begins with just pausing for 5 seconds before reacting.
Just 5 seconds.
Just 5 seconds. Or choosing a tiny alternative action, a deliberate breath, a moment of silence, choosing to listen instead of immediately defending yourself.
And what's happening neurologically in that 5-second pause?
You're allowing the old destructive coalition to dissolve without getting reinforced. And by choosing the breath, you're initiating a new coalition, a new frame. You begin to strengthen a new pathway.
And over time?
Over time, the new pattern becomes the default. The old one weakens from disuse. You're not jailed in the old movie forever. You are the actor, the editor, and the director of the next cut.
That is the real relief that comes from this deep dive. It's realizing we're not just victims being swept away by the stream. We can actively choose how that stream flows.
That's right.
The transformation really moves from, 1, just awareness, realizing you're being swept away, to 2, insight, understanding the mechanism of the internal film, and finally, to wisdom, choosing a new way to react.
And the sources really conclude with a powerful summary of all this. They say, your life is not a series of scattered accidents, but a stream of consciousness being rewoven every second by how you look, understand, and choose today.
Wow.
So when you look back at an old memory, a past mistake, a deep wound, try to see it as a single finite frame in a very, very long movie.
Not the whole movie.
Not the whole movie. And the question to mull over as you move forward from here is this. Based on the single frame I just experienced, how will I choose to edit the very next part of my story?